Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar, where we're focusing upon the strategic planning for the generating and the awarding of the 2022 JCPA. Over the course of the evening, we're going to focus on four key areas. Firstly, we're going to consider the student cohort, i.e. last year's third-year students who will be receiving the 2022 JCPA. Secondly, we would take a look at the overview, I suppose, of the 2022 JCPA structure. We're going to look at the whole area of gathering, the other areas of learning, and fourthly and finally, we're going to look at reporting on the wellbeing programme, which is historical. It'll be the first time it will be reported on in the 2022 JCPA. So let's just revisit, I suppose, the structure of the junior cycle. There are 8 principles, 24 statements of learning, 8 key skills. There are the subjects, the level 1, level 2 learning programs, the wellbeing programs in our schools, the short courses in our schools, and also the other areas of learning in our schools. And all of this makes up the actual curriculum. But also there's the area within the framework of assessment and reporting. And this evening we're really looking here at the whole area of reporting, i.e. the 2022 JCPA. So let's just consider last year's third years who were first years in 2019. These students were the first students to sit the written SEC exams in the subjects aligned to Phase 3, Phase 4 and Phase 5. They were the first cohort of students to study all junior cycle subjects as per the 2015 framework. These students were affected by the remote learning, the first phase of remote learning when they were in first year, from March to June 2020. They were also students at second years to be affected by the area of the remote learning, the second remote learning phase from January to March 2021. There was a requirement for these students to do a minimum of 1 CBA, but of course we know that schools could have done 2 CBAs, and we're very much aware many schools chose to do 2 CBAs with these students. There was no requirement for the students to complete the AT, the assessment task. And last but never least, the area of wellbeing is appearing on JCPAs from now, i.e. 2022 JCPA, which is actually historical. We also need to remind ourselves, though, this evening, for last year's third years, there was a requirement for them to complete CBA 1 in modern foreign languages, i.e. the oral communication task, and to complete CBA 2, the communicative task in Irish, as both these CBAs are linked to the final examination, i.e. the SEC examination in these 2 subjects. But also they had to complete CBA 2 if they were studying visual art, home economics, music, applied technology, engineering, graphics, and wood technology. So let's just pause for a moment and revisit the whole area of reporting as a process, but also as a product. In terms of it being a process, the framework is very, very clear in stating that reporting at junior cycle, it aims to contribute to the personal and the educational development of our students, i.e. it's very much about reporting on their holistic development. On the product, the framework states that formal reporting on the progress and achievement of students will be through the annual reports in first and second year, and will then culminate in the generation and the awarding of the JCPA to our students following their learning journey across the 3 years. And ultimately, it is an opportunity for you and I as educators to celebrate our students' successes as they complete their junior cycle learning journey, and also for us to showcase the broad range of their learning and achievements. So what does the 2022 JCPA look like? Well, we're now very much, I suppose, aware of what the 3 templates look like as per the JCPA 2022 handbook. And it is very, very important that you use that as your go-to document, as your scaffold in terms of generating and awarding the JCPA. So the first template is that for students who have studied junior cycle at level 3. It will be generated via PPOD. It would show the subjects that the students set in the State Examinations Commission exams and their results, their classroom-based assessments for both subjects and short courses, The area of wellbeing, IEP, SPH, and CSP will be reported on it. The other areas of learning, the other areas of wellbeing. In terms of the second template, this is for students who set their junior cycle either at level 1 or level 2. This is generated through JCAD, and I'll return to that in a few moments. However, if you do not have the login details for JCAD, best practice is to speak to your principal, and they will be able to get the log details and provide you with them for generating the JCPAs at level 1 or level 2. There is detailed guidance in the JCAD handbook. It will show the results for the students who set as CPAs for subjects and short courses. The area of wellbeing will appear. The other areas of learning will appear on the JCPAs. And for students who set a level 2 learning program in their schools and their priority learning units, they will have the descriptor of achieved. Also, their engagement with the PLUs where the descriptor achieved is not awarded, it should be reported on in the other areas of learning. In terms of the template 3, which was a combination level 2 and level 3, where some students following a level 2 learning program may have engaged in some of the level 3 subjects and short courses. Depending on your school setting, this would be generated using PPOD or JCAD. It would show the subjects that the students set in the state certified examinations. The students' CBAs, the results of their CBAs that they undertook in subjects and short courses will appear. The area of wellbeing, PE, SPHE, and CSP will appear. The other areas of learning, the other areas of wellbeing. The level 2 PLUs, the priority learning units, will show the descriptor achieved. And again, where students did engage with the PLUs, but the descriptor achieved is not awarded, their learning within the PLUs should be reported in the other areas of learning on this template. Just to go back to JCAD for students engaged in the level 1 JCPAs, as I've said, it's produced through JCAD. This is the email address for you to contact, for your principal to contact for the login details for your school. There's excellent guidance in the JCAD handbook. It would show the results for the students who set CBAs in subject short courses. The area of wellbeing reported. The other areas of learning will be reported on it. And for students engaging, as we've said, in the level 1 priority learning units, it would show either progress achieved or successfully completed. In terms of the JCAD, which is the Junior Cycle Awards database, this is used by centres of education, special schools, and by mainstream schools to generate the JCPAs for students who undertook no State Examinations Commission exams. This is the email address for the login details, the screen. As I've said, there's detailed guidance in the handbook. Schools are able to add students to JCAD and enter their achievements in any of the short courses and CBAs, PLUs that they undertook using relevant descriptors. Partially JCPAs should be downloaded from JCAD and saved locally by the school, which is very similar to the other 2 templates. Schools must record details of students' achievement using a third-person format for the other areas of learning and the other areas of wellbeing sections. You may refer to student participation in the short courses, PLU, subjects where the student has not completed the formal assessment and no descriptor has been awarded, and also any students who participated in the JCSP schools programs. Acknowledgement can also be reported on in the students' JCPAs. So let's just pause for a moment again and just look at the template here and a few key essential ingredients in terms of reporting on the 2022 JCPA. We know that the subjects that students study will appear. Classroom-based assessments and their descriptors will appear. For students engaging in the level 1, level 2 priority learning units, their results will appear. Other areas of learning, other areas of wellbeing, and also the curricular wellbeing programs, the short courses, including CSP, SPHE, and PE, and any short courses that your school may be also timetabling as part of your junior cycle program in your schools. To remind ourselves, and we know that some of you are very, very new to the role this year, we in the junior cycling implementation support team did develop an action plan over a year ago. It was sent out to schools and it's also up on our website. And it gives you suggested activities that should be undertaken each month to ensure this, I suppose, the smoother process in terms of the roles, the duties you may have, and the generation of the JCPA. But it is very important that if you are new to the role, that there would have been a, I suppose, a handover, an official handover from the previous junior cycle coordinator or management resource arts person. And you're still unclear about what that person did previously to you, because, you know, gathering other areas of learning and generating the JCPAs, i.e. the last one in 2019, is not a new process, has been done in your schools, and there are people in your schools that have very, very detailed knowledge of the processes involved, and it is important that you do discuss this with them. Again, in terms of, I suppose, this evening's focus, it is strategic planning, and it's about, I suppose, using SMART goals and where we were last year when we knew the 2022 JCPA was going to be made available to last year's third year students and what we would have been doing. So let's cast our mind back. Third year students last year, we were continually discussing with our school leadership teams, our year heads, our tutors, and indeed the students around the other areas of learning, the other areas of wellbeing. We were collecting their other areas of learning and other areas of wellbeing probably towards the end of last year in terms of the students around April and May when they were in third year, and discussing this with key members of staff. We may have been using Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, or other methods of gathering the other areas of learning and wellbeing. And we look at those shortly, and we hear Philip and Caroline speaking about it. And we know that by the end of May, when the students were about to sit their SEC exams, we were storing all of this data locally and ready to input it on the 2022 JCPA, which we now know the portal is open for us to do this. So some strategic considerations of populating the JCPA. The department's post-primary online database, i.e. PPOD, this is the tool, the portal that we use to produce the JCPAs for students in mainstream schools who undertake the State Examinations Commission. We know we're now required to produce and indeed award the JCPAs to all our students last year's third years by the 24th of March. And it is important that they do have their awards ceremony in whatever way you actually celebrate that, so that their moment is not forgotten about. There are different separate data sets on the JCPA. The SEC data will appear, the CBA data, the short course data, data relating to the other areas of learning, data related to the other areas of wellbeing, data relating to the priority learning units. And we know that's important within our schools, because schools are different, but that each school has their own protocols on the rollout, on the mop-up process, the inputting of data, editing data, i.e. checking the character count, storage, printout, the signing by the year head, the principal, and also the JCPA award ceremony. So it's important to be strategic about this and to discuss it with your school leadership team. And most of all, it is important, I suppose, to focus on the 2022 JCPA handbook. So with that in mind, I suppose it's important that we probably, we listen here to Philip and Caroline discussing, I suppose, some of the strategic considerations that they're currently involved in their own schools. So I might ask Philip to just talk to us, and then Caroline around some of the key facets in terms of what they're doing at this moment in time, instead in terms of strategic planning for the awarding of their school's JCPAs.
Thanks very much, Ada. Well, I guess as the MRH person, it's important to keep in touch with the SLT, make sure that everything's transparent and that you're on top of things. I know it's been said a few times now, but making sure you have access to PPOD and JCAD, or if you're going to work with a member of the SLT team, it's important to have that access, because you will spend a lot of time on it, especially when you're producing the JCPAs. I guess from now we're looking towards populating the OALs and the wellbeing sections onto JCPA. We have quite a large school. We had about 176 complete junior cycle course last year. So there is a bit of admin involved. So it's important that I'll sit down with the SLT, and they understand that the amount of admin that actually goes into it and how we can divide the workload up. So we've had that meeting, and what we said would best suit our school is if we divide them up into their base classes and get them done 30 at a time, because it can be a significant workload, but we decided, and they understand, that if we break it up in smaller bits, it will make our job a lot easier, and we'll get it done by that date at the end of March. Other than that, it's just important to double check as well, coming up to this time, that you have your OALs gathered and saved, whatever way works best for the school. I know in our school, the best fit is the Microsoft form, like you mentioned. I guess the handiest part of that is we're able to send it out to students quite easy to their emails, and then the results are stored on the Microsoft Form website, ready for me to copy and paste onto their JCPAs, and just throw an eye over it and just proofread that before they're sent off to the printers. I guess that's where we are now, and we're just in the middle of that now, of downloading JCPAs and populating them.
That's great. Thanks for that insight. And can I just ask you there, you just mentioned about meeting with your senior leadership team, just on a global, I suppose, insight on that, because I know you are the MRE teacher over a period of years, Philip. How often would you meet your school leadership team over the course of an academic year? Is it maybe 2-3 times, or?
Well, like it really depends on the needs of the school. I know when I started the MRH role, I guess I was lacking a bit of confidence, but it was great to be able to meet with them on a more frequent basis. Now it's more so just on a kind of updating basis, now that I'm comfortable in the role and I understand what's required with the JCPA. So yeah, it might be maybe once, twice a month. It's not very formal. We sit down, we go through the MRH newsletter, the to-do list, which is very helpful, and we just make sure we're staying on top of things. It doesn't have to be an hour-long meeting every time. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, making sure we're all on the same page, and they're happy to hear if I have any issues or if I need any extra assistance. And we found that's worked out well over the last few years.
Thanks so much for that, Philip. Caroline, again, just to yourself as well, at this moment in time, we're thinking about strategic planning for the awarding, the downloading and awarding of the 2022 JCPA, i.e. last year's third year. So where are you yourself in your own school in St. Oliver's Post-Primary in Oldcastle?
Yes, Ada, a number of tasks last week were very pressing for us. So before even getting to the population stage of the JCPA, it's just ensuring that a couple of tasks are completed, in particular using the privacy statement. So we were ensuring that that was circulated on our school website. If that's something that's new for people, the handbook and the page 20 of the handbook has a template of the privacy statement. We edited it for our school and it has gone up to our school website. In previous years, I've circulated that at parent-teacher meetings, and I know some schools send that out by letter, but that's something that has to go out to be shared with all parents. In addition to that, about 3% of our students do the level 1 and level 2 programs. For those students, you need to obtain consent from parents for the data to be shared between PPOD, JCAD and the Department of Education. Those forms have to be returned and have to be retained in the school should there be a program inspection. So they went out and that's been done. So like Philip was saying, you need to have a strategic team around you for this. It's very difficult to deal with things like consent forms if you haven't got your special education needs coordinator involved and so on. Some other things just in terms of the tasks and the practicalities of it, logos and signatures, making sure that they're okay. Ours were pre-populated from the last time round, but some schools may enter into arrangements where they like their yearhead and principal signatures on it, so just ensuring that they're checked. If people are a little unsure about that, there's a frequently asked questions document that accompanied the 2022 handbook. You need to check out page 1 of that, and it will give you some instructions around it. And then following that, sort of last week and this week, we've really been intensely looking at populating the JCPA. And like Philippa said, this is something that's moved really strategically in our school, and there's quite a number of people involved at it now. Our senior management team, we've three middle leaders also involved in it, because there's a considerable amount of support required from admin in the office, and ICT support from our ICT coordinator, and particularly around collating of the data around the other areas of learning. So it really is something that's very strategic in the school. So some things that just popped up for consideration for us this time. I know I had to update the software on my own computer so that I had the ability to edit the JCPA. That's something that's important for people to consider. If you have issues with that, I know the handbook again deals with that. I keep referring to the handbook, but it really is your Bible for getting you through this process. So page 10 of the handbook will go through that. And then you're into the actual population of the JCPA itself, and the SEC section is the first section that we've dealt with. So auditing the state examination section just to make sure all your students are there and entered for the correct subjects. Where you have anomalies, you need to contact. And for us, our operating system will be run by PPOD. And where we had anomalies and where the anomalies couldn't be dealt with at school level. And when I say dealt with at school level, there are two documents that it's really imperative that you do get really familiar with. The Junior Cycle Profile of Achievement Guide for PPOD users, and the Junior Cycle Profile of Achievement Guide to Short Courses. And they're two documents I really had to read, and I use them as my first protocol. And where they don't answer my questions, I will get on to the help desks for PPOD or the help desk for JCPA, and they've answered my questions where anomalies have arisen. For the other operating system, EasyNet, they have the same documents available. Other things in terms of the state examination section, people will be aware that letters went out very recently on the 30th of January about the appeals process. So it's just really contacting senior management or the exams coordinator to see what students have submitted appeals. That letter did state that appeals may impact the issue or the reissue of the final JCPA by schools. But my most up-to-date information from the help desk at JCPA is that new JCPAs will be issued should a student's result change due to the appeals process. The CBA section, for us again, we had some anomalies, but for the most part, the anomalies were dealt with through the handbook. Where I did have to contact the help desk on one occasion, and we were talked through the changes that were needed to be made. But one thing that we did find out very useful for that is when we do make a change, be sure to save and to regenerate your JCPA. We thought there was a lag in the system, and that was a fault at our end. We hadn't been regenerating the JCPAs. I'm not sure, Ada, do you want to maybe come in there? Shall I go on to other areas of learning, or?
Well, that's great, Caroline. We actually might go into the other areas of learning now. I'll just discuss it generally, and then we'll come back to your good self and to Philip as well. But thanks so much for that, Caroline. So as Caroline just ended there, talking maybe beginning to mention the OALs, maybe we'll just begin to look at that, everyone, and I suppose strategic considerations around gathering the other areas of learning from last year's third years. Indeed, you probably have those gathered already. Looking at the strategic planning and our action plans for MRH and junior cycle coordinations in schools. So let's just think about the OALs. For those of you particularly who are new tonight around this area, what can be included as part of the reporting on the other areas of learning in the JCPA, indeed not just for 2022, but the current third years will be the JCPA cohort for 2023. How does your school currently provide information on your students' broad range of learning? Because we did, mention at the beginning of this evening's webinar that the 3-year learning journey of our students culminates in the generating and the awarding of the JCPA, which is a celebration of the broad range of students' learning, unlike the traditional, the awarding of the SEC results. Now we have a huge array of wonderful learning that we can award and acknowledge through the lens of the JCPA for our students. But also, how is the data in relation to your students' other areas of learning gathered. And again, we'll hear from Philip and Caroline in a few moments about this as well. So let's just pause for a moment on the other areas of learning. There is indeed flexibility in the other areas of learning pre-text section, the famous box, to report on the other learning experiences and events that each individual student in your school has participated in over the 3 years. The other areas of learning, the OALs, should focus upon learning that has been achieved by the student rather than on the individual activities, i.e. what skills, what knowledge, what values, dispositions, attitudes did the students develop over that period of time. Reporting on the students' learning during co-curricular or extracurricular activities as part of their junior cycle programme, the schools can be acknowledged in this part of the JCPA. It can indeed include students' involvement in social, cultural, pastoral, scientific, entrepreneurial, and other activities which can support the 24 statements of learning and the 8 key skills aligned to the framework for junior cycle. It should be written in the third person format. A minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5 learning statements are suggested to us in the JCPA handbook. And there is, just to acknowledge, that there is a limit of 150 words or 760 characters when we're thinking about how we're going to report on the other areas of learning on the JCPA. So as we're all very much aware, as Philip and Caroline were mentioning just there a while ago, it does provide an opportunity for schools to acknowledge, comment on our students' achievement, participation or progress, the students' progress in this section of the JCPA aligned to the framework junior cycle. So what about the other areas of learning? Well, there are 4 key aspects we need to acknowledge and be cognizant of as we're reflecting on this in our own journey as we strategic plan going into the future. We have here the wellbeing indicators, which can be aligned to the other areas of learning. We also have here the 24 statements of learning, which all of us originally would have had during the previous JCT whole school CPD days, around day 1, where we engage with the 24 statements of learning. The 8 principles as part of the framework, but also last but never least, we also know we've got the key skills as well for junior cycle students, including that of literacy and numeracy as well. So on the screen here, you can see that students, as we've said, can have their work acknowledged that they participated in those of curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular activities, such as membership of the student council, membership and participation of sporting activities, membership of different school clubs or societies, the Yellow Flag, the Active School, Friends Youth Programme, Young Environmentalist, Social and Innovation Action Programme, and so forth. So there's a huge, vast array that we can actually use to feed that data into the other areas of learning on the JCPA. So let's just think about some examples of suggested achievements. And again, we're just looking at suggested examples on an individual basis, bearing in mind that there is a word count here of 750 words, minimum of 3, maximum of 5. Specific awards that the students have won, member of the sporting team, part of any club, any learning experience with the student. And we need to think about student voice and ask our students, what would you like included as part of your JCPA? Remember, we're strategically planning here. It's not just the 2022 JCPA, but maybe even thinking about our current cohort of 3rd years, our current cohort of 2nd years, who will eventually receive their JCPA. How the students taken part or been involved in some school event, a school mass, an open night, and so forth. As we said earlier on, a member of non-sporting extracurricular activities, as well as the sporting extracurricular activities. Or where the student may have performed in front of their peers at a school musical, a dramatic society event, a dance performance, being part of Shopton na Gaeilge, and we want to acknowledge those other areas of learning, those other experiences that the child engaged in. So let's pause again, strategically planning. How does your school currently provide information on your students' broad range of learning? We heard Philip mention there a short while ago how when he was new that he would go to a school leadership team, look for guidance, look for support. But now that he's comfortable in the role, he's quite clear in the role, as is Caroline. And for those of you new tonight, I suppose if you've taken on this post this year, you do need, as we've always said during our community of practice for management resource hours teachers and junior cycle coordinators, it's important to have that formal handover from somebody who's been doing this work, because this isn't the first year we've reported on the other areas of learning. But to pause and ask that person who's been doing this, or if you're very familiar with this, how are you considering the key skills? Are you thinking about the 24 statements of learning in the framework for junior cycle? Are your students generating the evidence of their learning, maybe using a reflective journal, or as Philip said, a Microsoft form or a Google form? How is that happening in your school? Specific learning experiences that do not form part of the subject of the short courses, are they being acknowledged as part of the other areas of learning? Are you identifying maybe the students' engagement with curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular activities that can be aligned to the other areas of learning? As we say, if you're new to this, it is important to sit down and talk to your school leadership team, but to go and speak to the person who has previously been coordinating doing this. And as Caroline said, there needs to be a team here. It can't be down to one person, but these strategic processes need to be set up in schools where there is a roadmap towards gathering the other area of learning statements for the students for their JCPA. So in this section of the JCPA, as we've said, you may also refer to some learning, the engagement that students have engaged in, that they've studied as part of their short courses, or subjects where they've not completed the formal assessments and no descriptor has actually been awarded. For example, a student who may have transferred from another school where the subject or the short course is not available in your school, or for students for some particular reason do not complete this classroom-based assessment or classroom-based assessment, singular or plural, or the final examination. And also results of short courses from a school maybe where more than 4 short courses were on offer can be also recorded in this section as well, i.e. the other areas of learning. So it is important that we focus on the learning aligned to the skills that students have developed, the knowledge and the values, as opposed to not necessarily the actual activity that they've engaged in themselves. So for example, X has realised how important it is to be part of a community, in school and with their friends. X cares and respects for others and is a great listener. Their friends know they can ask X for help. X has become more connected with their friends, school and community. So what we've done here tonight is just a sample statement here that's aligned to the student's sense of belonging to a wider community and also their listening skills. And we've just bolded some key words here. Obviously that wouldn't appear on the JCPA. And that particular one there has 54 words to it. There's another one here where we're acknowledging that an individual student, third person, the language of the third person, was involved in some school sports teams. And that the knowledge based on, I suppose, their activities here and the COVID restrictions, that the students created a healthy walking club for their classmates, their peers and their teachers. And it's showing an acknowledgement that the student has a knowledge of the importance of having a healthy lifestyle, and also that they develop their reflective skills. And again, there's 50 words here. And last but never least, a child that may have been part of the student council. They researched the need for a healthy eating menu, and they took responsibility for improving the school environment and so forth. And this again is the child being aware of the need for a healthy lifestyle. They used digital technologies while they were researching their data, and the need to take responsibility for their own actions. And again, that one has 42. We're not saying to take all 3 of these together. These are just sample ones here. They can be even less information or more information. You're the judge over that in terms of the JCPA, but a minimum of 3, a maximum of 5. And we do need to be careful of the word count there as well. In terms of gathering data relating to the students' other areas of learning, some strategies. Create an online survey for the students to complete, maybe, to fill in on their other areas of learning. You've probably done that for last year's third years and about road mapping that into the future. Maybe some schools during a tutor class that the individual tutor teacher supports the students in reflecting on their learning experiences over the course of junior cycle. At an agreed time in the school year, the calendar, it's a reflective homework task for the students to do, or a member of staff in consultation with the school leadership team might coordinate this aspect of junior cycle. But as Caroline Flippin said, there does need to be a team here involved in this and having that two-way conversation taking place. Or maybe using some of the allocated management resource hours as the JCPA handbook mentions as well. So let's just pause again and just ask ourselves about the students reflecting upon their learning. It is a key skill to reflect on their learning. There are two particular key skills in the framework: managing myself and also managing information and thinking. There are two key skills aligned to the framework junior cycle. And we look on the screen here at managing myself. One of the elements states that the student is able to reflect on their own learning. And then in terms of managing new information and the thinking process, that the student over a period of time is given those opportunities to reflect on and evaluate their learning. And this would feed in to gathering the other areas of learning from the students as well. Again, the NCCA's updated 2021 Wellbeing Guidelines states that the inclusion of student development statements within the other areas of learning is important, i.e. that we have the conversation with the students around this. It helps our students become more aware of themselves as learners. It includes student voice in the whole process of reporting, and it makes clear, visible, student engagement in wellbeing beyond the learning in the actual classroom, what takes place outside of the classroom. Over time, students can take responsibility for deciding what they wish to include in the other areas of learning section of the JCPA handbook. And it clearly states in the guidelines, the wellbeing guidelines on page 83, over time, this is a reflective process and we need to support the students in developing those reflective skills. So students reflecting on their other areas of learning, there's an absolutely fantastic model of reflection here from Wolf, Freshwater and Jasper that comes from the NCCA's toolkit number 4, students reflecting on their learning, and wonderful strategies here that we should be able as teachers on a collaborative approach, a team-based approach, to take and adapt and use to gather the other areas of learning, indeed the other areas of well-being as well for the JCPA. The strategy here is what have I learned as a result of my engagement in this activity? So what? What does this tell me about my strengths as a learner and about my gaps in understanding? And last but never least, now what? What are my next steps? Again, it's about teaching the students how to reflect. How do we teach them how to reflect? We give them those opportunities to reflect on their learning. Maybe if now we just go back to your good selves, Caroline and Philip, and maybe ask yourselves about how you're approaching the whole area of gathering the other areas of learning for your students. So I might just flip it around and maybe begin with you first, Caroline, and then over to Philip.
Thanks, Ada. Like you said, it's a systemic approach, and it's very strategic within the school. You're reporting on that sort of non-formalized learning that happens over 3 years. So when we began with it, I stuck to the guidelines that you've alluded to earlier, and that's really important that you do that. And there are some sort of mechanical guidelines and strategic guidelines that you have to follow. Certainly the word and the character count is really important. And even within that, there are limitations because font size, the font type, and the layout, for example, if you use bullets, they all take away your character count. So you have to be very particular about the statements that you create, that they're very short and succinct. So that's a big consideration for us. You alluded to, Ada, in the guidelines that it's less about the activities and more about the knowledge, skills, and competencies that they achieve based on the key skills of the junior cycle. So what I did initially was an audit of the activities that were going on within the school. So for example, everything from your sports groups to your trad groups to perhaps creative writing competitions, poetry competitions, scholarships, and so on. Following the audit, I linked these activities to statements which included junior cycle key skills, so like the ones you alluded to, managing myself, and information and processing. The basis for the generation of our statements happens through the use of, like Philip said, we use an online form. So the form has all of the activities listed within our school. All of the activities that are listed have a link to a teacher and year head, and each of the activities are grouped in terms of the key skills. So for example, we have a school musical, we have a trad group, and we have a choir. All of those activities come under the heading of performing arts, and performing arts is linked to being creative, one of the junior cycle key skills. So on a student's form that where they have been involved in school musical, the trad group, or the choir, it will say in their form that they have participating in performing arts has improved my confidence and my creativity. I was inspired to share my talent with others and see performances through to completion. So we've gone through each of the key skills and generated a statement linking to each of the pupils' activities. As I said, they're collated using a form. The form is administered using year heads, the tutors, and the ICT coordinator. The use of the ICT aspect allows us to collate the data and to identify the word count at the end. So when I see the form at the end where the word count has gone over, I can go into each of those student accounts and edit that back down so that it's still kind of saying the same thing. The guidance that's given to the students is that if they are identifying activities that they have been involved in, that it has to be an activity that they sustained. So it can't be just turning up to an activity 3 or 4 times, that it must be something that is sustained. We do have elements on our forms that are a little more bespoke, where students may have got an award for something, or may have achieved a scholarship. So for example, if a student won a specific woodwork award, and they would tick that as an activity, but on their JCPA it would say winning a woodwork competition helped me to explore my creativity and stay with challenges to completion. Okay, Ada, I'll pop back to you there.
Just what Caroline, you were saying there, I thought that was a great idea about auditing the school activities as well, and giving the students an idea of what they have achieved. Because in our school, our approach is, obviously students can find it difficult to like reflect on their achievements. So what we did was put together a resource pack on how to speak reflectively or write about themselves in the third person, and reflect on their achievements, and kind of incorporate the key skills and principles of the junior cycle into that. We have, again, it was a discussion between the senior leadership team and myself, how could we best carry this out in our school. So what we came up with, and again, it's a best fit for each different scenario, we said, well, we have our base classes, we put together a worksheet resource for the students with prompts like we saw earlier, different examples of how to write reflectively, and again, the different activities in the school and different skills and different components of those extracurricular activities that they can reflect on in that section. The thing that we struggled with at the start was finding a time to gather all of the information. It was kind of, we had to set it in stone and pick a time that we are happy with. We decided on setting a week for all our third year base class teachers or tutors, or whatever way they refer to in your school, to go through it with their own class groups and just talk about them, about the OALs and how to write reflectively, and to fill out the space. And again, just introducing the idea of the word count and different examples. And it would have been then that the forms were sent out to the students. So the form we send out is very basic. It's name, their class group, and then just their OILs, the free text space allowing them just to input what they've put together in their base class when they have time to reflect. So this happens around March, April time, just getting them thinking about their achievements to include on the JCPA. So we're coming up that again soon now. Yeah, I think that's everything there on the OILs, Mara. And
that's a good question. Sorry, Caroline. Yeah.
I just add just one other thing, Philip. You just reminded me of it. What I've got asked from other people in the same position as myself is like, you know, is it your responsibility? Who collects it? And it's just, again, it's back to, these are strategic considerations for the school, like who collects it, how is it collected, and like you said, Philip, ours happens around the same time. It's around about Easter every year. We collect it, Easter of their third year. We leave it till Easter of the third year because there's always a mock-up, so students won't be in when we're actually collecting the data on the forms. And you know, that happens, a person has to be appointed to take that mop-up responsibility. Also for other students that may have transferred to the school and transferred lately, you've got to get the details from their other school. And again, you're referring to the interschool transfer protocol, getting some information there, or going back to the other schools and seeing can some of that data be included on their other areas of learning. And then again, and who quality assures it. So if a student does identify that they have done something, is it something that is sustained, and who quality assures that process? You know, it's involving your tutors, and involving your year heads, and involving the teacher that may have worked with that student on achieving an award in woodwork, or you know, or sustained involvement in football. Okay, thanks, Ada. Go back to you there.
That's great, Caroline. I'm just looking at the chat as it's coming in terms of some questions, and we will address many of the questions coming towards the end of the webinar. But an interesting one here, guys, that came in about the other areas of learning. If a student has been involved in a number of activities, sports clubs and so forth outside of the school setting, and has been awarded an award, can this be included in the other areas of learning? And I would say no, that it must be school initiated. Isn't that correct, Philip? Caroline?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be school initiated, yeah, and something that is sustained. Yeah, certainly within school. Yeah,
that's great. Thanks a million, folks. We'll just start now looking at the other area, that is the other areas of well-being here. So we need to pause and think for a moment, I suppose, at some strategic considerations around your school's well-being program and how you're going to report on that. So how was your school's well-being program structured? Did you actually do the curricular short courses in CSV, SVHEP, or did you do one or two and so forth? You know what's right there, but you do need to talk to your leadership team to clarify that. How will you actually report on the well-being program in your school as well in the JCPA, the 2022 JCPA? And we know for the current first years, that's now actually 400 hours over the 3 years. And who will be involved? As Caroline was mentioning there, that there is best practice, strategic protocols very much is that there's a team here around this process about reporting on the students' achievements in the wellbeing program, the other areas of wellbeing, the other areas of learning and so forth. So really and truly tonight, we're thinking about the JCPA for 2022, maybe picking up some ideas from our panelists in terms of going into the future. But just to pause, to date, we're now situation here in the month of February. We have a number of weeks left before we have to generate and indeed present the JCPAs to last year's third year students. So how have you been assessing the students' learning within your school's individual wellbeing programs? And what evidence have you actually gathered, and how have you been gathering that evidence in your schools to date? As is the focus of assessment, within the area, the whole area of well-being is gathering evidence on what the student has learned about well-being, i.e. the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, the values, the dispositions that the students have actually gained. That's what we're really focusing on here at this moment in time. And this is what the NCCA's updated wellbeing guidelines are very, very clear on this, is that it is about their knowledge, skills and dispositions that they have gained over their 3 years of engagement with the framework for junior cycle. The wonderful NCCA's document, Ongoing Reporting for Effective Teaching and Learning, that was published in 2018, that your school leaders would have received a copy, and there would have been CPD put on by the leadership team and JCT around this. But it very clearly states on page 34 that reports that we send home, be that school-based or indeed the JCPA, it may indicate student learning in the school's wellbeing programme, thus providing the student's parents or guardian, whoever's at home with them, with a picture of what the students are learning about well-being, but also the skills they are developing to support their own well-being. So we need to think about our individual schools and how our curricular, the timetable well-being programme was structured. And for last year's third years, we're going to receive the 2022 JCPA. There's a number of different, I suppose, modes that schools could have engaged with the wellbeing programme. Using the specifications, the NCCA specifications for the short courses in CSV, SPHEP, your school may have designed or used externally designed short courses in CSV, SPHEPE, or used other programs or modules or units of learning for CSV, SPHEPE. But also, we know that some schools continue to use the Junior Cert syllabi for CSV and SPHE, and also the PE syllabus. And we can see here on the screen that's dating back to 1996, year 2000, year 2003, that schools did have the option to use those for their curricular wellbeing programme. So we're talking here tonight about reporting on wellbeing, but you need to be very, very clear here as people involved in this process, strategic planning. What exactly did your school use in order to timetable the wellbeing programme? Because that's important when you go to look at the other areas of well-being. Where are you going to get those statements for your students aligned to what particular program that you used in your own particular school? So reporting on well-being in the JCPA, as we mentioned earlier, it is very much historical now. This is the first year. It's a section to report on their achievement in the CBAs related to well-being in the 3 short courses, CSV, SPH, and PE, if you've used those short courses in your school, using the descriptors yet to meet, in line with, above, and exceptional. The NCCA's assessment guidelines for short courses provide very, very clear, detailed advice for teachers around this area, and where you amend these short courses or develop your own short courses. You can indeed use the assessment approaches used in the NCCA short courses to inform the design of the CBA, because there would be one CBA aligned to each of the short courses, and that will reflect itself on the JCPA with a descriptor. But we know also that the JCPA includes a free text space where schools can report on the students' achievement in wellbeing beyond the curricular programme of PE, SPHE, CSV, such as assessments completed as part of their engagement in the wellbeing units of learning to make up the hours. And also schools who actually provided the Junior Cert syllabi in CSV, SPHE, and PE, or one of them, or all 3 of them, or 2 of them, will have to report upon their students' achievements in these 3 particular areas, in the areas of learning, using the free text box entitled the Other Areas of Wellbeing on the JCPA. There is flexibility, very alike the other areas of learning, in this free text section to report on their learning experiences that the students have participated in over a period of time. The other areas of well-being should focus upon not just the activities, but rather the skills, the knowledge, the values, the attitudes, dispositions. Again, a similar focus to that of the other areas of learning, but here we're talking about the other areas of well-being. Thirdly, it can include areas such as the guide-related learning, units that address different aspects of well-being, elements of other subjects that are clearly linked to well-being, school initiatives, relevant courses, and units developed by outside agencies and organisations, written in the third person format, a minimum of 3, a maximum of 5 statements, but also, as Caroline was mentioning, and very similar to the other areas of learning, there is a limit there of 150 words or 750 characters there. So we need to pause and think here. Using the wellbeing indicators to support student reflection. We know within the area of wellbeing, there are 6 indicators as seen here on the screen. These indicators make very clear to the students, teachers, parents, school leadership team, and the wider community what is important as part of schools' wellbeing programs. Each indicator has a number of descriptors. And the indicators, the 6 indicators and the aligned descriptors can be used in a number of ways. For example, to create those prompts, scaffold those conversations with our students about their learning within the school's wellbeing program, and also to train the students on self-assessment, self-reflection about their learning in the area of wellbeing. And that clearly is stated in the wellbeing guidelines, the updated guidelines on page 43. So on the screen here, you can see here a suggested template from the NCCA's updated wellbeing guidelines, Appendix C. And what it's looking at here are the 6 key indicators, but there are also some prompts here to enable the student to reflect on their learning within an individual school's wellbeing program. And again, as we've mentioned earlier on, we're thinking about last year's third years, but we're also thinking about strategic planning going into the future and how we can create those moments and support the, I suppose, that reflective process with our students reflecting on their engagement with the wellbeing program in your schools. So as we've mentioned, we need to focus on skills, the knowledge and the values here. An example on the screen here that's aligned to the wellbeing indicator of being connected and the key skill of working with others. And there are 51 words here. X participation in our school's My Friends Youth Programme, which gave them opportunities to work with their peers on projects designed to enhance their wellbeing and the wellbeing of others. This enabled X to feel connected to their school and the local community and to appreciate that their interactions impact upon others' wellbeing. You can write something more lengthier or less wordy. That's just an example there. So you can see how it aligns to the wellbeing indicator of connected and also the key skill of teamwork, working with others. Another example here, about 41 words, linked to the wellbeing indicator of aware and the key skill of working with others, where the student was part of an organising committee for their school's Fair Trade Fortnight. They developed an awareness of fair trade practices and worked to ensure that the school canteen changed the menu on offer to support fair trade goals. So again, they're just suggested examples here. You can write more or write less, but a minimum of 3, a maximum of 5. And as Caroline said, you need to be very, very careful with the word count and also the character count here, and bullet points, and also the type of font you use will have an impact on that. But again, it's similar to other areas of learning in terms of the font size, the word count. So if you're new to this role, you do need to talk to the person that you've taken over from around this, because they will have experience aligned to this. So students learning in terms of wellbeing on the JCPA. We know that we may report on their learning in wellbeing also the other areas of learning. So this is where it might get a little bit technical, but this is what we're going to walk you through this. 1 or 2 learning experiences outside of your school's wellbeing program might be included. For example, X developed confidence and became more physically active through their involvement in the school's athletics club. X increased their awareness of well-being, their well-being or the well-being of others, by being on the organising committee for Anti-Bullying Week. So again, here you can actually align it to other areas of learning. And this is quite clearly stated in the 2022 JCPA handbook. So we would suggest you go to that. As Caroline said, it is your go-to document there. So in terms of gathering the data, as Philip and Caroline said, it can't be down to one person. There needs to be strategic planning aligned to this. Some suggestions: create an online survey for the students to complete. Maybe there might be a dedicated school email address that you have access to. And the students in third year are invited to email their contribution to this part that they want to see on the JCPA directly to this email address. Students might be able to provide the information to a nominated teacher, for example, their tutor or year head. A member of staff, in consultation with the school leadership team, might coordinate this aspect of junior cycle, or indeed you may use some of the allocated management resource hours in your school. They're not the way, they're suggested ways, and school cultures, contexts differ. And it's best practice to use a team approach to this, but talk to your leadership team around this. Last May, school principals were issued with a letter from the department that stated what's here on the screen, that due to technical constraints, it is not possible to reflect subject descriptors for the old junior certificate syllabi in the wellbeing section of this year's 2022 JCPA. So those students who were in third year last year, who studied the old syllabi for CSV, SVHE and PE are affected by this, but students who studied the junior cycle short courses are not affected by that particular issue. So accordingly, for those schools which did provide the junior certificate syllabi in these three areas, would like to reflect on their students' achievement via the free text box on the JCPA in the other areas of wellbeing section. So it will be blank for all students who did not study short courses in these areas. Okay. Suggested text has been developed, and we'll show you this on the next slide. And schools can use the text here on this slide, or you can adapt the text that's on this slide. So there's 93 words, and then there's 43 words. You can adapt or copy and paste. It is a school-based decision, but it's important to talk to your school leadership team around this. Okay. Schools should assign short course descriptors where appropriate to those students who have indeed undertaken the short courses in any of the short courses, CSV, SPHE, PE. For those students, you may populate the free text box with appropriate language of your own choosing as well. Caroline mentioned the privacy notice. It is required by data protection that schools commencing the process of any personal data must bring that privacy notice to the attention of the parents and the guardians. And this is related to student engagement level 1, level 2, or level 3 junior cycle. And that Appendix 3, a copy of that is in the 2022 JCPA handbook. So again, I might just pause for a moment and maybe ask you, Philip, about the other areas of wellbeing and where you are strategically with gathering the other areas of learning in your own school, and then Caroline may come in there. Philip?
Yep, thanks, Ada. Yeah, so it's very similar again to how we set up the initial OALs. I guess the difference this time is kind of just teaching them about the focusing on well-being, which is quite new to them, and the well-being indicators and focusing on their well-being. So again, we put together a resource pack to help them identify parts of their learning that is associated with well-being. And we also found a space in their school journal where we encourage weekly reflections on a Friday for our junior cycle classes, and it offers them prompts and things like that, and the well-being indicators, just to get them thinking on a week-to-week basis. And then when it comes to third year, they'll have a greater idea of what be expected of them and in the well-being section, and how it might differ from the OAL section. Again, it's a Microsoft form. We just feel it's the handiest approach to this. Now, with last year's class, obviously we'll be using one of the templates that were on offer. We didn't fulfill the full junior cycle courses with some of the junior certs in there as well, so they'll be left blank on the actual JCPA. And then for this year, it'll be the template. So that'll be going forward. We'll see what issues might arise with students reflecting on that and seeing if what has been put in place by the school is working effectively, and if not, we'll just have to tweak that again and just finding the best fit for our own student body.
Great, thanks for that. And Caroline?
A little bit similar again to Philip, Ada. So we've been given the two statements, and for this year we'll edit one of the statements to suit our needs, and then augment augment it with additional statements that are more bespoke to our school. I suppose the considerations for this year are a little different than others going forward. So because a level of autonomy was given to schools in terms of rolling out wellbeing and getting towards their 400 hours, schools are at different levels of their ability to report on wellbeing. So in our school, we did the short course on CSPE. You know, we report on that through the statement, but we also have PAP and SPHE, all courses taken, and also of course a bespoke short course in literacy that has a wellbeing element. So we need to be able to reflect that in our statements. But going forward, some of the more strategic considerations for ourselves and the conversations that we're having involve things like you know, the identification, the collation and the reporting of other areas of well-being, and trying to keep this systemic approach similar to the systemic approach that we take for other areas of learning, so that the students aren't sort of, I suppose, relearning a new system. And it just helps us within the school that, you know, when you've got two systems that are the same, for me, I think that's easier to manage. But, you know, discourse that's happening around that is, we used the pronoun I for the reporting on other areas of learning, and we just felt it was gender neutral. And the guidelines, and I know they are only a guide, is to use the third person, but obviously we want the other areas of learning, the other areas of well-being to be similar on the form. So for us, we feel that I is appropriate for where we are at, and particularly because students are identifying these statements themselves. So that's one thing that we're discussing and generating discourse around at the moment. Another thing as well is that in our other areas of learning, we reported under the key skill of staying well. So if a student had maybe participated in GAA, rugby, basketball, or some sporting activity in a sustained way and been on a team, it came out that their statement would have been, playing sports competitively has helped me realise the importance of staying well, sticking with commitments, and to value coaching and leadership. But moving to the other areas of well-being, students will have played a lot of sports in our PE program. So it's being cognizant that, you know, there are two systems in place, and sort of managing that. So yeah, thanks for that, Ada.
Thank you for that, Caroline. And just further to that, in terms of the privacy notice and the consent form, Appendix 3 in the JCPA handbook does include templates for the privacy notices, which should be brought to the attention of parents and guardians for students who have engaged in GE cycle, as we've said, at level 3 and level 2. And schools have responsibility to retain the JCPA for each individual student up to 7 years from the age of majority, so that's 18 plus 5. And in terms of the difference between the privacy notice, which must be given to all parents and indeed guardians, the consent form, there is a sort of difference there, and that is explained in the JCPA handbook. But the consent form is very much for the recording of assessment data that is relates to the level 2 learning programs and the level 1 learning programs. And this form must be retained by the school for the duration of the students' enrolment. So you've got the privacy notice for parents of all students, and the consent form is for students who have engaged in the level 1, level 2 learning programs. So let's just recap ourselves again here over the course of the evening. The SEC clearly have issued their results, which have synced to PPOD. So on the JCPAs for each student, you should see those results there. You've gathered the school data, i.e. the CBA results, the descriptors, the other areas of learning, the other areas of well-being. You'll be inputting that and generating the JCPAs, and then the students will have their awards ceremony. They will be presented with their JCPAs. Specific help can be received through the JCPA help desk. Now, there are actually 2 email addresses, as you can see here on the screen. The JCPA_helpdesk at education.gov.ie is very much in terms of having issues generating the JCPAs. But if you have maybe a new principal, or there's a change in year head, or the school crest has changed, there is a different email address, and you can see that there at the bottom of the screen, jcpa@education.gov.ie, but they are in the JCPA handbook. So coming towards an end, folks, if we just reflect on this evening webinar, similar to how we would get our students to reflect on their own learning, using the Rolf model of reflection, what have I learned this evening? So what does this mean for me in terms of my role here tonight, be it a school leader or a junior cycle coordinator, teacher, who has the school's management resource hours? And now what are my next steps? If I'm new to this role, maybe I need to speak with the person who previously did this, speak to the team that's involved in this, the last year's year head, tutors and so forth, but also your school leadership team. It's important that communication is always open, the channels are open about this, because this is very much a collaborative process over the next couple of weeks. A couple of questions have come in over the course of the evening, so I'm just looking down here at the Q&A, and I'll just address some of the questions there. One person has asked about appeals. Any changes made after the JCPA? Yeah, okay. Any changes? So if a student has appealed and you have already gone ahead and generated the JCPA, well, any changes as a result of the appeals will not be reflected on the JCPA clearly that you've generated. So it will be necessary to contact the JCPA help desk. The email is in the handbook. It's on the previous slide, so that the JCPA is regenerated. Somebody asked if students complete their school's JCSP program, can we record this on the JCPA? Absolutely, that can be reported on in the other areas of learning on the student's JCPA. Somebody asked that some students have engaged in some sporting activities outside of the school setting. Can they be used as part of the student's other areas of learning? No, it must take place for a period of time within the actual school environment. If a student drops a subject, do I remove it from the JCPA? Yes, as with anything like this, any anomalies, you will have to deal with this on a one-by-one basis. You may need at this stage, though, to email the JCPA help desk for some support on that. Somebody's mentioned that they've already made some changes today in school on Peapod, but they haven't synced. They're not showing up on their school's JCPA. There may be a lag, and we're aware that sometimes this takes up to a period of 24 hours. So I suppose what we need to do is just double check that tomorrow. If not, get onto the JCPA help desk. Okay, there's a significant number of comments coming in here about not reported appearing on students' JCPAs where they did not undertake a specific CBA. We are aware, as I've said, that there is frustration about this, because not reported is in itself a descriptor, but we understand that there are actual differences in the different software management information systems that schools are currently using, and we do not believe that there will be any change to this. I wish I had some better news for you on this, but the JCPA help desk is saying that essentially that not reported will appear. Somebody has just asked about the deadline for appeals. We were in touch with the SEC today, and they did inform us that they hope that the appeals process should be finished, finalised maybe towards the end of this week or the middle of next week. So at that stage, you'll be able to generate your JCPAs, hopefully. But if you do have students who have appealed their results, it's best to double check if those appeals have been upheld. No point in generating your JCPAs only to go back and double up on particular work for yourselves. And finally, everyone, just like to wish you the very best of luck as you're generating and indeed awarding the JCPAs to your students, the 2022 JCPA, to acknowledge Philip and Caroline for their tremendous support over the course of this evening. and just to wish you all the very, very best of luck, and to look after yourselves. Thank you very, very much.